This week, tariffs and reciprocal tariffs have been going back and forth. Many groups in the agriculture voicing concerns for the future of trade. But now we're joined by one association who's praising President Trump for leveling the playing field. Ethan Lane from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association joins us, sharing why some cattlemen believe these actions are long overdue. Hi, Ethan. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, first off, tell us why you think that these tariffs could be a good thing for some farmers and ranchers and cattlemen in our area.
Look, tariffs are a tool. They shouldn't be the end goal. They I don't think they are the end goal, but they are a tool that President Trump, in particular, believes very strongly in. He has been a fan of tariffs. If you go all the way back to things he said in the early 1980s, this is a tool he very much believes the U.S. should be using to engage in these negotiations. And quite frankly, we find ourselves at a point where a lot of our supply chains, whether they be agricultural supply chains or others, have sort of suffered from years of being part of kind of the incentive package in international relations. Whether there are challenges with other countries, objectives our government wants to achieve, offering access to our market for their goods has long been a bargaining chip. And the end result of that is production in the United States, whether it be beef or cars or whatever else, sometimes can suffer because of that. And so we are supportive of the president using these tools to try to balance the scales in these trade relationships. We need export markets. We need access to foreign buyers of our products, in particular beef in our case. The things we send to those overseas markets are typically things that we don't sell here in the U.S. And so we're hopeful the president can use this tool to get some better access, get some of those non-tariff trade barriers lowered, and then hopefully bring all of those tariffs back down as a result of that.
Exactly. And your website says that Australia, for example, has sold about $29 billion of beef to American consumers, but that the U.S. has not been able to sell a dollar of fresh U.S. beef into Australia because of some non-scientific barriers. Can you tell us about those barriers? What's stopping these sales?
Sure. So here's how these shakedowns kind of go. You do a free trade agreement, right? And you agree, okay, we're gonna allow free access for products from both directions. And in the case of Australia, they immediately started using that access to ship fresh beef into the United States. The vast majority of that is lean beef trimmings, which is what we're short on in the U.S. supply chain. We raise the best quality, highest marbled beef in the world, but what that does, it produces lean ground beef. So that's kind of what we tend to look for extra of from other countries, and Australia can provide that, which they've done with gusto for 20 years. But while doing that, they have continued to find paperwork hurdles and approvals and clearances, and gosh, we need to check the status of this program before we can allow you the same access to the Australian market. And they've played this game and run this con for 20 years now. And that's really what we're getting at here is, even if the tariff rate is effectively zero, if you can't actually access the market because of game playing, they have erected what we call a non-tariff trade barrier. We see the same thing in China. We see the same thing in Europe. This is a tool of many protectionist countries to keep better quality goods like what's produced in the United States out of their marketplaces.
Exactly. So you said that one had been going on for about 20 years. How long have some of these other tariffs been on U.S. beef?
So the Australian example is really kind of the egregious one. Some of these other relationships are pretty darn good. I mean, the Japanese relationship, South Korea, some of the other ones that are really front and center because of other issues, auto tariffs and things like that. For us in the beef industry, have been fantastic trade relationships. So we're really watching that matrix of different relationships and hoping that the president can really hone in on those where there's some wrongs to be righted. We understand he's taken a shotgun approach. We understand why he's doing that. We're grateful that he's put a little bit of that on ice for 90 days while he focuses on that Chinese relationship in particular. But there are some of those relationships that are working really well. But yeah, the Europeans are a great example. We should be sending more of our products to Europe. And the fact is, they have long had a lot of trade barriers erected, not just for us, but other countries around the world as well. The Brazilians have a lot of problems with how they report animal diseases and how they ensure that the quality of their system is equivalent to our system here in the United States, which gives us a lot of concern about them importing to our country. We've asked the USDA to shut them down as far as their access to our country because they don't meet those standards. But by the same token, they don't allow our products at scale into their market, so they've also erected those non-tariff barriers. It's kind of case by case around the world. Sometimes it's beef for beef, other times it's beef for automobiles. It's always that discussion of apples versus apples, or apples versus spaceships. It's always a little bit of an imbalance when it comes to trade relationships like that.
And how have these tariffs hurt producers here in the U.S. over the years?
Well, if you need an input because you don't make it here in the United States, and that input comes from a foreign country that has a tariff on it, that input could cost you more money. And you look at the cost of something, and maybe you're getting it from a country with cheaper labor, or whatever else. That's often the reason that somebody offshores a piece of production. So now having to put in a tariff could make that untenable. Where it really was concerning is in some of the North American theater, Mexico and Canada in particular. The supply chains of many industries in North America really weave back and forth across the Mexican and Canadian borders because of the decades of NAFTA and now USMCA, whether it be automobiles or beef. We send a lot of calves to Canada to be fed in feedlots in Canada, and then they're brought back down into the United States for processing. And they really take advantage of that system to use the best sort of available real estate for what's needed at that point. So putting tariffs on those relationships where full industries have set up their supply chains to take advantage of that easy back and forth border access, that's where you could see a real pinch were the president to go forward with tariffs there. Thankfully, for the time being, he has allowed all of those commodities that are covered under USMCA to remain able to move back and forth across that border without a tariff. That's really good news and something we're very grateful to the president for recognizing. We know he has some outstanding challenges with Canada in particular that he's trying to resolve. We have his back in working through that process, but we are grateful that he's given us a little breathing room in the interim so that we don't have disruptions to the supply chain.
Well, obviously, you've taken a different approach, a different public approach than a lot of other ag groups, and ag is pretty well connected. So do you think that this long-term gain for maybe the cattlemen is also long-term gain for all of agriculture?
I think all of these different supply chains are different. We have the luxury of not being overly committed to any one market. There's not any one foreign market that's buying, 40% of what we produce or 80% of what we produce. So, we'd like to keep all of those markets. We'd like to grow all of those markets. But if one goes away, it doesn't mean catastrophic destruction to our industry. I think some other commodities have evolved to a point where they really have a lot of dependence on one foreign market or two foreign markets. They have a different set of circumstances. They have a different set of concerns. I wouldn't dream of trying to speak for those other commodities. I can only really speak for the beef supply chain. But yeah, the conditions are such that for us, we have producers across the country who believe the president is doing the right thing here and is going to achieve some goals that are really helpful to our industry. And that's why we've taken the position that we've taken. But that also comes with a high degree of trust. The president in his first term took a lot of trade action that we had to trust him on. And at each juncture, whether it was the TPP situation and bilateral access to Japan, whether it was the Phase 1 China deal or USMCA, the president delivered for U.S. cattle producers and did what he said he was going to do. So we're going into this with a high degree of credibility with the president that he will do what he says he's going to do on trade, even when the methods to do it make people a little bit nervous.
And in the ideal world, what do you hope happens in the next months or weeks regarding these negotiations?
Well, I think for anybody who imports and exports, we don't love tariffs, right? Long term, we don't want there to be tariffs. But if they can be used as a tool to achieve a more balanced relationship, a fairer balance of trade between these countries, fairer access, and then the result of that is both sides recognize that lower tariffs are going to be better for businesses on both sides of that relationship. That's probably the best possible result. If the president can use this leverage to get us a better deal, and then everyone puts their guns down and basically says, okay, let's lower those tariffs with this new set of rules in place and allow trade to flourish, that's probably the best circumstances. But look, the president's got to have a poker face here. He's got to make sure he goes into that, making these foreign governments aware that if he doesn't get those fairer conditions he's looking for, he's perfectly happy to leave those tariffs in place. So we have to keep in mind that that's the negotiation here, and that's the high stakes game the president is engaging in on behalf of supply chains here in the U.S. And we have to go into that with our eyes wide open.
And what could new markets mean for U.S. cattle producers, especially those right here locally?
Well, look, this is the best place in the world to sell beef. There's no question about it. This is the best place in the world to produce beef and the best place in the world to sell it, the United States of America, period. But we produce a lot of things off of that carcass that American consumers just don't eat much of, whether that's tongue, whether that's offal, cuts like a top round or things like that just aren't at the forefront of American kitchens in 2025. Foreign countries have different diets, different eating patterns, and they can't get enough of those items. So every time we identify a foreign market that's willing to take all of something that we don't have a real big market for here in the U.S., that's added profit for the beef supply chain. It's added dollars for producers up and down the supply chain. It just helps us make more upside profit on each of those animals, and that's a win for everybody in the supply chain. So those new markets just allow us more choice there and more destinations for those products. It's never going to be a scenario where we can sell it all at home. We need those trade relationships. We need those foreign markets for different parts of the carcass, and we're grateful that the president is trying to find some of those for us.
Well, Ethan, thank you so much for taking some time to talk today. We appreciate you weighing in on this topic.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
A farm family in Minneapolis is being honored for their devotion to agriculture and their community. This week, I sat down with Dan Keitzer, who's the winner of the Wergen Good Farm Neighbor Award. He shares how a devastating situation during World War II is positively impacting his farm today. Well, Dan, congratulations. It's a big day for you today.
Thank you, Haley.
Yes. Well, we were just chatting a little bit earlier, but you have such a unique farm story. Take me back to the beginning and where we are today.
Okay. Well, our farm was not originally in this location. During World War II, a lot of families were devastated by what happened. They lost loved ones. They had people get injured. Our family, we thought we were having issues too but it turned out to be great in the long run. Our farm was actually about 20 miles south of here, just west of Burlington, Iowa. And the government came in and took a bunch of the ground to build an ordnance plant. They needed to make more ammunition, and they put a bunch of temporary housing up in Burlington to have all the workers stay in. But anyway, they only had a certain amount of time to get out of the area, and it was a pretty vast area that they took. So there was a lot of farmers trying to find different places to move to. So it was very hard to find somewhere. And if you go back to that period of time, people weren't as mobile. Cars didn't go 20 miles as easy to do. You didn't have cell phones, so you were leaving your family, your neighbors, your friends. Just felt like terrible. Well, it got to the point they had to get out, and they found this place here. And actually, the original house is down the lane just to my left here. And my grandmother did not like it because she wanted to be along the road because she liked to keep her place looking nice with flowers. And my grandfather said, we're only going to stay temporarily till we can find something else. And here we are 80 some years later in the same location. And it has been such a blessing because the land here is much more crop beneficial. It's a lot better ground than we had down there. And also my grandfather always said, they bought just a small farm to begin with. Well, luckily other farms in the area came up for sale and they were able to buy them, and they didn't all come up for sale at the same time. So, buying farm ground is a big capital intensive thing. And so they were able to slowly add to the operation. And so now we've been totally blessed to be in this location for basically 80 some years. My father could barely remember it. He was a kindergartner at the time when they were building the plant. He talked about how the thing he could remember was the bulldozers running at night. He could see the lights because they built it around the clock because it was they had to get it done quick.
Wow, that is such a story of being, forced to a different spot, but making the best of it.
Right,
it sounds
right.
Like.
You think at the time that it's the worst thing that could ever happen to you, and a lot of situations in life are like that, and as it turns out, it's a complete blessing.
Wow. Well, tell me a little bit about the farm here today. You guys have quite the operation. It looks like a lot going on, and your whole family is involved.
That is correct. We basically we're corn, soybeans, and then we finish pigs for on a contract with one of the packing companies. Actually, I'm the third generation. Like I said, my grandfather moved up here. My dad and my uncle continued the operation. My dad is deceased. My uncle still farms with us. He lives right across the road in the brick house. And then his son, which is my cousin Brian, him and I are partners in the operation now. And then my son Keaton has come back. He graduated from Iowa State in 18, and he's back starting to take over the operation. So I fully think it's going to be, 4 generations, and I do have a grandson now. We're hoping for the 5th. So, like I said, we've been blessed. It's just a great place to raise a family. When you can have kids involved in 4-H and FFA and do all those kind of things. My wife, actually, I met her at Iowa State University. She is from, she grew up in Davenport, went to Davenport Central High School. So I took a city girl, brought her back to the farm, and now she works with us here on the farm.
Wow. Well, tell me a little bit. You've also been involved in so many different organizations through agriculture. Tell me a little bit about your involvement there.
Yes, I have been over the years. I've been on the Extension Council and 4-H and Youth Committee and been part of the Fair Board. Now my main involvement was with the Iowa Corn Growers Association. I'm a board member on that. And we actually are out promoting corn really around the world, with U.S. Grains Council and stuff like that. I just came back from a mission to Southeast Asia, where we had an ag buyers conference, and I spoke to them about agriculture in Iowa, and just unbelievable their interest. My encouragement to them was in my presentation, my short presentation I was able to give, was I wanted them to come up and engage with me after. I wanted questions. And you won't believe how many people came up and talked to me. I've got a guy from Singapore who would like to come and live on the farm for a couple weeks and work with me on the farm. I wasn't sure how that would go over with my wife, so I didn't commit to that. But it's great when you get out and can put a face with the products that are being sold to these people, and thank them for their business and tell them that we are a ready supplier of corn. Part of my presentation was, our supply and demand tables, and how the fact that we never run out of corn. We've always got 1 billion or 2 billion bushel of corn carried over every year. So we are a ready supplier. We're a dependable supplier. And that's kind of my goal, is to try to help the next generations of farmers succeed by creating demand for the products that we continue to get better at growing.
Which might even be your family, the next generation.
Yeah, very much, yes.
Yes. Well, what does it mean to be awarded this award today?
Yeah, it's an honor. They do several of them a year. Gary Wergen was a radio broadcaster from Des Moines, Iowa, and died prematurely from cancer, and so they put this award together in honor of him. And so I've constantly heard the presentations, on WHO, and always thought it would be neat to get it, but you got to get nominated, and I had a person nominate me for it, and I'm honored to be selected. It's a complete honor.
And tying it back, to the beginning, you're talking about something not ideally happening, but creating a great, opportunity for you guys to be able to farm here. How has that bled over into other areas of your life in farming?
Well, one thing I guess I truly believe in is you got to support your local community. And so not only have I been involved in the ag organizations, but one gift I have, and there's a lot of things I can't do, that's for sure, but I do like to build things. If you look around on the farm, most of these buildings and stuff that are around here we've built, we don't hire it done, we just do it ourselves. So with that, I've spent a lot of time in our local community, working on the FFA park and different things, helping build structures, putting together volunteers, and being able to do it. And so, I guess I've always felt that, I guess it's a passion of mine. When you go out and do farm work, especially with livestock type work, you do the same thing every day. You do the chores this morning, you do it again tomorrow. When you're building something, it's going to be around for a long time. You can look at it and say, yes, I had a part in doing that. It makes the community better. And I really believe, with the Lions Club and other things, Mediapolis, that we've done some work with, that's what I really love to do. And I love to get other people involved in helping do those kind of things.
Wonderful. Any other advice for farmers in the area?
Stay positive. It's a very, obviously there are a lot of things going on in this world right now, and it usually does come out for the better in the long run. Sometimes there's a little bit of a learning or a little bit of a transition time, but I think with organizations like all the commodity organizations working to help increase our demand, working around the world to do that, there is a future, and that's why I've encouraged my kids to get involved in farming.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today. Congratulations. We're so happy for you.
Thank you very much, Haley.